And then, of course, underneath that is the fact that there was an ideological battle being played out. I would say a threefold ideological battle. There was a battle between her position, which was radically neo-Marxist, postmodernist, I would say. She was arguing against who she thought I was, and so that was the battle. And then there was the position I was trying to put forward, which had virtually nothing to do with what she was discussing.
She was fighting your strawman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and it was like I was able to remain reasonably detached during the interview because I realized almost immediately that whoever she was talking to bore very little resemblance to me. Yeah. And so, I mean, she was quite sophisticated in some sense in what she did, because she did manage to sort of... Her claims became so preposterous and so self-contradictory that it was difficult to remain completely detached. And I think, and this was the crux of the interview, and I think the part that's attracted the most attention, she had asked me at one point in a provocatively self-righteous manner just what gave me the right to assume that my privilege of free speech, let's put it that way, gave me the right to potentially offend someone and hurt their feelings. Yeah. And I thought about 6 things at the same time. But the first thing I thought was, you're a journalist. That's the last question in the world you should ever ask someone if you have any genuine integrity as a journalist, because that's all you have as a journalist. You have the right to offend people and hurt their feelings. And so I called her out on that. I said, look, you know, all you've done in the last 20 minutes is everything you possibly could to make me as uncomfortable as you possibly can. Yeah. And I said it in a way that I would say was designed to let her know that I knew exactly what she was doing. And then I suggested that that was actually okay because she had every right to do that, but that she couldn't have it both ways. She couldn't make her living and her reputation using those tactics, let's say. And those are, for her, those weren't tactics of seeking the truth. They were almost purely tactics of domination, right, and one-upmanship. Yeah. And maybe, you know, if you live in the postmodernist world, you don't believe in truth anyways. There's just victory and power games, and so perhaps that's what she was pursuing. I don't know exactly what she was pursuing, but it was so palpably obvious to the two of us at that point that she had in fact done nothing except try to make me uncomfortable, that calling her on it left her speechless. And then that was the only time, I would say, when I actually spoke to the genuine human being instead of the ideological
so the
front.
Ideological front, it fell off briefly, and then you said, I got you?
Yeah, well, I would say technically, and this might be interesting for people who are interested in Jungian psychology, if you want to understand what Carl Jung meant by animus possession, which is a very difficult concept, then that interview was a textbook case of having a discussion with someone who is animus possessed. And I can't explain what that means because it's very complicated, but if you go and read Jung and you read about animus possession and you need a demonstration of it so that that you get a sense of what it means, then that interview is exactly indicative of that. And I would say, as advice to people, maybe it's more like education, with anyone who is animus possessed, their goal is to engage you in the argument. If you engage in the argument on the terms they've defined, you lose. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose. Yeah. You lose as soon as you engage in the argument. And so what I did in the interview was just not engage in the argument. Yeah. So I wouldn't say I did that with 100% perfection. Yeah. One of my friends, a very smart guy, there was the scene, let's say, where she was taken aback. I said, "Ha, gotcha." And my friend said, you know, maybe you could have played that differently there. Maybe you could have said, all right, so, you know, obviously you just thought about what I said, you know, and maybe we could actually have a real conversation about that. But, you know, I had become somewhat angry, a little bit, at that point, because she had violated the rules that make journalism possible by suggesting that I didn't have the right to make people uncomfortable with my speech. Like she had broken a rule that she shouldn't have broken in my estimation, and that made me angry. And so I said something that was designed to be witty, hopefully it was witty, and I thought that was a reasonable approach, and maybe it was. But it might have been better to have played it straight and said, look, okay, now we can get somewhere, you know, because we're actually talking now.
Yeah, so you mean that after the "ha, got you," you would have taken control of the conversation?
We could have actually had a conversation.
Yeah.
We didn't have a conversation, or well, depends on what you mean by conversation. We had a kind of conversation, but what we actually had was a dominance hierarchy dispute.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With an ideological overlay.
Yeah, definitely.